Watcher in the Woods by Mike. Last summer, my friend Jake and I decided to go camping in the remote woods of northern Michigan. We'd been planning this trip for months, wanting to disconnect from technology and enjoy nature. What we found instead was something that still keeps me awake at night. We arrived at the campsite around 4 p.m., a secluded spot about 3 miles from the nearest trail marker. The forest was thick with towering pines, and the silence was almost unnatural. No birds chirping, no rustling leaves. Just an oppressive quiet that made our voices sound too loud. As we set up our tents, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. You know that prickly sensation you get on the back of your neck? It was constant. Jake noticed too, but we both tried to laugh it off. Just being paranoid, he said. But his voice had an edge to it. Around 8 p.m., as darkness began to fall, we heard the first sound. A single branch snapping somewhere in the woods behind our campsite. We froze, listening intently, but heard nothing else. Probably just a deer, Jake whispered, but we both knew deer don't typically break branches that loudly. We decided to turn in early, around 10 p.m. I was lying in my sleeping bag, almost asleep, when I heard footsteps. Not animal footsteps, human footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling our campsite. The steps would pause for long minutes, then continue. I wanted to wake Jake, but I was paralyzed with fear. The footsteps continued for what felt like hours. Sometimes they'd stop right outside my tent, and I could swear I heard breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing that didn't sound quite right. I lay there motionless, barely daring to breathe myself, waiting for morning. When dawn finally came, I crawled out of my tent to find Jake already up, pale and shaken. "Did you hear that?" he asked immediately. Before I could answer, we both noticed the footprints. Perfect human footprints circled our entire campsite, not once, but multiple times, creating overlapping rings in the dirt. But that wasn't the worst part. On a tree, directly facing my tent, about 6 feet up, someone had carved fresh marks into the bark. Deep gouges that formed what looked like tally marks. 7 of them. And at the base of that same tree, we found a small pile of items. A child's shoe, a broken watch, and a faded photograph of a family we didn't recognize. We packed up and left within the hour, barely speaking until we reached our car. On the drive home, Jake finally broke the silence. "Those tally marks," he said quietly. "What if they weren't counting days? What if they were counting people?" We reported what we found to the local ranger station, but they said they'd had similar reports before. Campers finding strange items, hearing footsteps, feeling watched. No one had ever been hurt, they said, but several people had simply disappeared. I still wonder who was watching us that night. And I can't stop thinking about those 7 tally marks. carved fresh into that tree. Story 2, The Thing That Followed Us Home, by David. 3 years ago, my family and I went on what was supposed to be a relaxing weekend camping trip to the Appalachian Mountains. My wife Sarah, our 10-year-old daughter Emma, and I had been looking forward to this getaway for weeks. What followed us back from that trip changed everything. We found a beautiful spot beside a small creek, far from any other campers. Emma was thrilled. She loved exploring, and there were plenty of interesting rocks and wildlife to discover. The first day went perfectly. We hiked, cooked over the fire, and Emma even caught her first fish. But that night, things started to go wrong. Emma woke us around 2 a.m., crying that something was scratching at the tent. Sarah and I listened carefully, and we could hear it too, a rhythmic scratching sound, like long fingernails dragging across the fabric. But when I unzipped the tent flap to look outside, nothing was there. Just the dying embers of our campfire and the gentle sound of the creek. It was probably just a raccoon, I told Emma, but she shook her head firmly. Daddy, it was trying to get in, and it was whispering my name. Sarah and I exchanged worried glances. Kids have active imaginations, especially when camping. But Emma wasn't typically prone to nightmares or making things up. The scratching returned the next night, but this time Sarah heard the whispering too. A low voice, barely audible, repeating Emma's name over and over. When I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, I found long scratches in the dirt all around our tent. But these weren't made by any animal I knew. They were too deep, too deliberate, and they formed strange patterns that almost looked like symbols. We decided to pack up and leave a day early. Emma was too scared to sleep, and frankly, so were Sarah and I. As we loaded the car that morning, Emma pointed toward the tree line. "There it is, Daddy," she whispered. I looked but saw nothing except shadows between the trees. But I had that same feeling I'd had both nights, the overwhelming sense that something was watching us, studying us. The drive home should have been a relief, but Emma kept staring out the back window. "It's following us," she said matter-of-factly. I checked the rearview mirror constantly, but saw nothing unusual. Just other cars and empty roads stretching behind us. But when we got home, things got worse. Emma refused to sleep in her own room, insisting that it was outside her window. Sarah found more of those strange scratches, this time in the mulch beneath Emma's bedroom window. Our neighbor mentioned seeing someone in our backyard late at night, but when he called out, whoever it was simply vanished into the shadows. The incidents continued for weeks. Scratches on windows, whispers in the night, and always that feeling of being watched. Emma started having trouble at school, telling her teacher that the camping thing wouldn't leave her alone. We considered moving, changing schools, anything to help our daughter feel safe again. Story 3, The Midnight Visitor, by Alex. Last October, I decided to take a solo RV trip through Oregon's remote backcountry. I'm a writer, and I thought the solitude would help me finish my novel. I chose an off-season campground that the ranger assured me would be completely empty. He was right. I was the only person for miles around. Or at least, I thought I was. The campground was beautiful, but eerily quiet. No other campers, no staff after 6 p.m. Just me and the vast Oregon wilderness. I set up in the spot furthest from the entrance, wanting complete privacy. That first evening, I cooked dinner outside and watched the stars, feeling completely at peace. It was exactly what I needed. Around 11 p.m., I was inside working on my laptop when I heard what sounded like footsteps on the gravel outside. Slow, deliberate steps that paused right beside my RV. I turned off my laptop screen and listened carefully. The footsteps continued around my vehicle, as if someone was inspecting it, checking the doors and windows. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the door, calling out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped immediately, but I could feel a presence just outside the range of my flashlight beam. "The campground is closed," I called into the darkness. "You're not supposed to be here." No response, but I heard the soft crunch of footsteps retreating into the woods. I tried to convince myself it was probably another camper who had arrived late and was looking for a spot. But something about those footsteps bothered me. They were too measured, too careful. And whoever it was hadn't used a flashlight or made any of the normal sounds you'd expect from someone setting up camp in the dark. Around 1 a.m., I heard tapping on my RV's side window. Not knocking, tapping, like someone gently testing the glass with their fingernails. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap, tap. I peered through the curtains, but couldn't see anyone. The tapping moved to the next window, then the next, working its way around my RV systematically. I was terrified, but tried to stay calm. I called out again, "What do you want? I'm calling the police." But instead of leaving, the tapping became more insistent. It moved to the door, then to the roof of the RV. Someone, or something, was climbing on top of my vehicle. I could hear footsteps directly above my head, pacing back and forth across the roof. The pacing continued for over an hour. Occasionally, I'd hear scratching sounds, as if someone was trying to claw through the roof. My cell phone had no signal, and I was too frightened to leave the RV. I sat there with a knife in my hand, listening to the footsteps above me, praying for dawn. When morning finally came, the sound stopped. I waited until full daylight before stepping outside. What I found made my blood run cold. The entire roof of my RV was covered in deep scratches and gouges. But these weren't random marks. They formed letters, crude but unmistakable. "Come back tonight." I packed up immediately and drove straight to the ranger station. The ranger listened to my story with a grim expression, then showed me a file folder. It contained similar reports going back 15 years. Solo campers reporting midnight visitors, strange scratches, messages carved into their vehicles. Each report described the same thing: someone or something that appeared only at night, never showed themselves clearly, and always left the same message. "We've never caught whoever's doing this," the ranger told me. "But we've found evidence of someone living in the woods, makeshift shelters, tools, personal items. We think it might be someone who doesn't want to be found." He paused, studying my scratched RV roof. "You're lucky you left when you did. The last camper who ignored the message and stayed a second night. We found his RV 3 days later, completely destroyed. But we never found him. I never went back to that campground, and I never finished that novel. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone, I still hear that systematic tapping sound, and I wonder who or what is still out there in those Oregon woods, waiting for the next solo camper to visit." Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more terrifying true stories. And remember, next time you're camping alone, pay attention to those sounds in the night. You might not be as alone as you think.